What is up, everybody? Hope you guys are having a fantastic week, fantastic day. I actually got some sun. I'm at different background than you see me last few weeks. I'm actually at home. That is my home office with my look at my fancy Ryan. Look, check out my fancy LED.
Yep.
It's even check this out. It's even got a remote.
I didn't know it had a remote.
Yeah, it's got a remote. It's pretty cool. It's the coolest thing I've ever done.
And if I remember correctly, you've got a dual purpose one too. Like if you were to flip your desk around, you got a
I got triple walls because I got the pool view, I got that view, I got this view, and then I put rollerblade wheels on my desk. So nice. It's pretty cool. I'm very excited.
If the camera rolls away on you halfway through this,
no, they're locked. They're locked. So we're good. We're good. All right. So we got some really cool stuff coming for you guys today. Want to welcome Ryan O'Hara. This is the first time he's been on screen with me. And you even did you wear like a suit coat for this?
Oh yeah.
I'm in like a t-shirt and shorts. Like I don't even have shoes on.
I've usually got my hat on for the webinars. I get all spiffy.
I don't even have shoes on. That's how much I got.
Well, probably lucky you have pants on to be honest.
That's fair. That's a very fair point. So this is going to begin our series with Ryan to where we are diving into the technical aspect. Now, most of what we do at Seven Figure MSP, we are very sales focused. We're very marketing focused. We're very cash flow focused. But some really important things that we have to talk about now: cybersecurity, the tools you use, assessments. Did a really unique, amazing webinar with Darren Swan from Total yesterday. Ryan, I don't know if you got a chance to watch that, but Darren and I were talking about the opportunity to go mid-market into the co-managed type scenarios. $150 plus a seat for doing only cybersecurity. We got some guys. I know we were talking to Nick Stevens. You and I met with No Nick at our live event that we had in Phoenix. He did a live stage presentation to where he's got I think hundreds of seats at $250 plus per seat doing only co-managed.
Yeah. I bet you that's like in the next 5 years, that's going to be more the norm than it isn't.
I think that is going to be the opportunity that is here for the managed service provider that has never been, which is, historically we've been 1 seat to 150 ish. Sometimes you get a little bit more, but not much more than that. I was talking to Maria, our sponsor coordinator at Seven Figure here this morning, and we were talking about where the SMB starts. And, I think my largest client was 219 is what I said. It was 219 seats. So it's kind of like, that's kind of was our upper echelon. Now we have this upper echelon that's literally everything from 1 all the way to enterprise, and maybe even some enterprise depending on, because you guys have the skill set. You also have the tools that they don't have access to. So it's going to open up a whole nother level of stuff. Now that means you got to be ready for it. Obviously, and Ryan, you know this, but I want the rest of you guys that are out there, you hear me talk sales a lot. You hear me talk wealth and money and business and all this other stuff. You have to be ready to think like a broker, not thinking like a tech, because the days of crawling under desks are pretty much, I don't want to say they're over, but with the White House cybersecurity initiative and the FTC safeguards, and we got more stuff coming over the next few months here, you're going to be held responsible for putting in cybersecurity and be mandated for, right?
I mean, we're in the world where the IT stuff that we're used to is the easy stuff, and we need to move on.
Don't disagree. 100% agree with that. And you're a great example of that. Before we dive in too much, I want to have you give a little bit of a background on yourself, and then what you're going to talk about today. We'll kind of get into the guts of your presentation really quick for everybody that's here with us. This is a live session. Today is March 22nd, 2023. It is 12:34 p.m. Central Time. I get people that are like, "Oh, you're recorded. It's fake." This is real. Okay.
Show like a newspaper. Like
I should. I can show my phone. I guess. I mean, there's my phone. But I guess I have to do that. But I want to let you guys know that we're going to be taking some live questions. We'll take some other different things going on here. So if you have a question, please put it in the comments. Also, this will be replayed live in the group. And also, if you're in the IT and MSP business owners group, that's our big 18,000 plus member Facebook group. This goes into the guides section of the group. So if you go into the guides section after this call, you'll see all of our calls because we did marketing week 1 through 4 with Lindsay Badillo, our marketing coach. And then we did sales weeks 5 through 8 with Cindy Phillips, who's our sales coach. And now we're weeks 9 through 12 with Ryan talking about the tech stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we do a little intro on you? Oh, actually, before we do that, let me just mention really quick here, coming up in just about a month and a half, we do have our live event coming up in Nashville. That is May 16th, 17th, and 18th. Look, I got the dates right. Literally, I do this every week. I get the dates wrong every week. So I got the dates right. But you guys can go sign up. We got a huge speaker that we are just about to announce. Ryan, you know who it is. Mm-hmm. This is going to be unbelievable. Everybody's super excited about it. So very, very excited about that. But live.sevenfigureMSP.com. Let's, you guys can do that. Ryan, a little quick intro, and then let's get into your tech guts of your presentation.
Sure. So I am Ryan O'Hara. I am the 7-figure MSP coach in residence, which basically just means that I have an MSP as well as being a member and then a coach for the program. So I started my MSP, Sphinx Cybersecurity, back in 2009. We're based in Dearborn, Michigan. And then
you did a rebrand too, right? Remember?
Yeah. So it was originally Sphinx Technology Solutions. As 2020, we rebranded to Sphinx Cybersecurity as we kind of.
Was that a good move for you? Do you think? I don't mean to cut you off on that, but
I do. I mean, just from keywords alone, I mean that got us, some incident response gigs, and it makes it real apparent like what you're doing. So we are a security focused MSP. So we can provide all of those same IT services, but I made the decision at that point, we're specifically only working with people who are willing to invest in cybersecurity. I didn't want the liability any more than they should want the liability.
Yeah.
So I think it was a very good move. And then, so I've been a part of the 7-figure MSP community for a little over 4 years, I think now. And then reached out to Chris. I think
I've got a 4-year pin on your.
Yeah, right. We should get that. Reached out to Chris probably like a year and a half ago. I was like, hey, I've been helping a lot of people, on the calls, which, the thing I like the most about our community is just the willingness everybody has to help each other, as opposed to kind of what you typically see in IT world, where everybody thinks that the competition doesn't want to help everybody. So I reached out and said, hey, if you're ever looking for anybody to help coach, let me know. And here I am. So,
yeah. And I will tell you, from my standpoint, it's been a great fit. Like, it's really been fun to have you on the team. You fit really well with Cindy Phillips, and it gives that. And Ryan also runs our tech stack. We only have 2 calls in our whole program that are really tech focused, but one's a cybersecurity call and one is a tech talk call. So it's
and the security one was only added a month ago. So
yeah, and Ryan runs both of those, so it's really cool. Okay, so let's get into kind of the guts of what you're going to do today. I've got we got a good question from Sheila, which we'll come back and hit. Can you see that on your screen?
Yep, I can.
Oh, okay. So I'll bring that up a little bit later.
Okay.
We'll do some Q&A at the end. Sheila, thanks for that comment. I'll bring it up and we'll answer that. But let's get into Ryan's question here. So Ryan, I'm sharing the screen so your slides are live.
Yep. Sounds good. So we've got 4 weeks to talk to you guys. This week, we're going to start with the cybersecurity risk assessment stack, because that's really where you should be starting all of these engagements and these conversations that you have with people. And we'll get into a little bit why that is. So a little bit about us. 7-Figure MSP is a sales and marketing coaching program, as Chris mentioned. We help MSPs double their monthly recurring revenue, double, triple, quadruple. We've had some people recently who have doubled it like in the first couple of months, which has been amazing.
Well, and we've seen a lot of members that have come back now a year later. I'm thinking like Brett Gallant, some of these other guys that are like triple what they were, and their endpoints are just over half. And that doesn't mean that they've shrunk. It means that they've purposely chosen clients to work with because they wanted their numbers where they wanted them.
For sure. No. And just in my experience, my first 18 months, I tripled my MRR and cut my endpoints supported by a third. So really.
I didn't know that was your real number. That's great. I didn't know that.
And then we also focus on teaching you the skills that will help keep your business profitable for years to come. And I think that's a lot about kind of the tech aspect and the operations aspect that Chris was talking about. It is, about marketing and sales and getting those things and building up that MRR. So you have that cash flow to solve those problems. But, one of the things we're going to be kind of talking a little bit about over the next 4 weeks is, the things that you can do operationally, with your stack to streamline your operations a little bit and make sure that you're not just taking that MRR and, also doubling your problems, right? If you've got bad processes and stack issues and service delivery issues, and then you double your MRR, you're exponentially increasing those problems as well. So we're going to help teach you a little bit about that. The team. So you've met Lindsay, you've met Cindy over the past 8 weeks. If you haven't had a chance to watch those sessions, I highly recommend going back to the guide section that Chris was mentioning in the Facebook group, or looking at the views from the other. We're on YouTube and LinkedIn, so going back and looking at those. The stuff that we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks just is not possible without having solid marketing and sales. So, without those things and getting those prospects in front of you, you're not going to have much use for your stack. So it's really important to start there. And that's why our program starts there. So while the tech is probably one of the more interesting things, because a lot of us, have that tech background running these MSPs, make sure that you focus on the marketing and sales to get there. And then that makes the stack all that more important. And then, of course, there's Chris, I guess. I almost forgot about you.
We need to talk about me. It's fine. Wait, let me take that banner off the screen. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Chris is the one that follows you around, speaking of marketing. So, if you've ever clicked on any of his stuff, now anything you search on Google, he's popping up. He still does that to me, too. It's kind of scary sometimes. So you're probably here because you want to scale your business. You're looking to network with growth-oriented MSPs. And like I said, I think that's one of my favorite benefits of the program is just the community. It's something, we talked a little bit about the live event, probably bring that up again before we are done today. But really, you don't know what you're getting into or what you're missing until you've come to one of those events and just see how everybody interacts with each other. It's a completely different world than what I had witnessed in the IT world prior to joining this community. So highly recommend you take a look at that. You want to get reinvigorated for the 2023 new year, or you are just curious about the stack that gets you 300 plus a seat. And that's why I think week 4 is going to be really interesting. We're going to talk about the security stack. Whenever one of those $300 per seat posts gets put up in the Facebook group,
everybody wants to know that stack.
I bust out the popcorn because those are usually really entertaining to go through, and we usually end up with 300 plus posts going back and forth about this, that, and the other thing. But a lot of them result in oh, that's great, but what's included? What's the stack? And people have their own assumptions. So we are going to answer those questions over the next 4 weeks. So the agenda for the next 4 weeks today, like I said, we're going to talk about the cybersecurity risk assessment stack. Next week, we're going to talk about standardizing your stack. So it's not going to be as tool specific next week, but it's going to be more about the philosophy around your stack. So like I was saying a little bit earlier, one of the problems you can run into, you see this rapid growth with a program like this. But what happens after that? Like if you've got your own problems going into it, if you've got, you're using different stacks across multiple clients, you're all over the place, you're just going to multiply your problems at the same time. So we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy around your stack, ways to approach it, how to build it, things like that. Week 3, we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty of the tools for your ongoing support stack. I called this one managing your clients' expectations. Again, in my opinion, these days, this is the easy stuff, but it's still necessary. You still have to perform that day-to-day IT support. What are the tools that you're using to do it? How do you have that structured and set up? And then week 4 is kind of the season finale of our 4 weeks together. We're going to talk about the security stack. And
one thing I just want to say, I know there's going to be some people that are going to come on this call right now and say, just get to the stack. Just get to the stack. Tell me the tools. Guys, here's the thing that's really important. And I did a note. I don't talk to Darren Swan from Total very much. We see each other once a quarter at our shows. We never text about strategy. We never, we only text each other. Very rarely do we call because we both got a lot of stuff going on. But my point being, Darren and I did an hour-long webinar. We could not have been more streamlined on our exact mutual approaches of how big. Like Ryan, we did zero prep for that call.
Yeah.
And it was all like we were 2 peas in a pod talking about the same stuff. And 100% of it is your role is switching to you have to be talking risk on the front side or you're going to be commoditized.
Right.
So if you want to get away from selling IT as a commodity, meaning They judge you based on price.
Yep.
And get into security, get into these things. You have to do risk assessments on the front side. You have to diagnose before you can prescribe. This is mandatory. This is not just for you, though. Yes, it's important to see people that are there, but or what's there on the network and the hackers or threats that might be imminent. But it's more that we're educating the prospect as to where they sit and what's going to happen if they don't. So they have to understand the why. So it is critical that we talk about this piece. Now, if you want to see the sales side of it, please go back and watch weeks 1 through 4 with Cindy. You can watch them consecutively. It's 4 hours of content, but it's really good stuff.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, it's weeks 5 through 8. I'm sorry. With Cindy Phillips and me. And it's really critical because that's how you get in the door. That's how you have these conversations. But then actually doing the risk assessment is what Ryan's going to talk about now.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to
we're gonna overlap a little bit at a very high level with some of the stuff that Cindy might have spoken about, just because, like Chris said, it's important to understand the why you're doing these things in order to really grasp the how. Like, you have to get that mindset shift so you understand why this is so important. And so that's a few of the things that we're going to do. And then Chris, your point reminded me a little bit of some of the speakers that we've had who have come in, and then that we've had conversations after they've come off stage just about how impressed they were with the questions that we asked the community and where we're at. We had Chris Krebs last year, the former CISA director, and he was blown away afterwards about the way that we were, and was telling us how our people are in the right spot. They're doing the right things. They're asking the right questions. So, all right, well, let's get into it. So why do we always start off with the cybersecurity risk assessment? It's extremely important. I'm jumping the gun here. Most prospects that we're talking to have very little understanding of IT services in general. And when we move that conversation to security and take it that next step further, it's even less. I mean, they're typically very clueless. They're basing a lot of their actions on their personal experiences. And if they're a small, medium-sized business, they may not have any personalized experiences with security. Partially for reasons like business owners don't talk about this stuff. They probably do know another business owner that's been hit, but quite frankly, people are embarrassed by that. It's stigmatized, so they're not having those conversations. So, your average business owner who hasn't had an incident directly typically is sitting there going, "Well, I don't know anybody it's happened to, so this isn't a real thing. Why would they come after me?" Those types of things. So, really, it puts us into the position where we need to teach them about the fact that they don't know what they don't know. A lot of the purpose of the CSRA in the first place is about educating them and getting them up to speed so they understand what their risk is. Before we can pitch cybersecurity services, they need to be educated on what's really going on, why they're at risk, and what their risk looks like. I mean, how many times have I talked to a prospect and they're like, "Well, we don't have any risk. We don't have any PII." We do an assessment like this and we find out every single time that that's not the case. And in most cases, they're surprised by it.
And let's also not forget, everyone has money in the bank. Everyone has risks with that. And part of the scenario here, and if you go back and review what Cindy and I talked about on her sales training calls, stop allowing the client to dictate the path.
Right.
They only know what they know at this point, and what they know is everything they've always done. So, and Cindy's got a great saying, which is, "Do what you always did, get what you always got." And I love that saying so much because you have to be the one that says, "Nope, we have to do things differently now." Are the threats different? Ryan, you know the answer to that. The threats are way different than they've ever been. Are there risks way higher? Yes, they are. All that stuff's the answer to all these questions is yes. So you have to stop the client and embrace your no. And anytime you have a question, I got an RFP. Like, we got this yesterday, right? Ryan, you and I got this yesterday from one of our guys. I got an RFP. I don't know how to handle it. All roads lead to a CSRA. That's your mindset. We always have to come back. And if their RFP is not ready for it, then you have to have that conversation and you just say, "Nope, I'm not going to do it like this. Oh, but I might lose the deal." Stop letting the client dictate that. Do it the right way. Because at some point it's going to catch back up to you, which we see with our members. It catches back up to you where it's really good. And the amount of time, like Jerry Morgan just posted a deal. I don't know if you saw this last week, where she said, oh, these guys that fired us, hired their own IT director, just got hacked, and now they got this pile of steaming mess that they're dealing with.
Right.
This is the stuff that's going to happen.
And it can be counterintuitive at times too. You think having those conversations, so like an RFP, for example, reaching back out to them and saying, hey, are you even in a position to where you can put this RFP out? You need an assessment in order to really answer the questions and know what you need in the first place. And they may balk at that at first, but you come back, turn around, they've realized a month later, you're the expert. You told them no, and they're coming back to you. So it may be a delayed response, but it's a lot different scenario if you just bend over backwards and let them dictate the whole process, because I mean, they're doing that based on what experience. You're the expert in this scenario, and you need to have that.
For so many years, it was never like most MSPs, most break fix IT people don't think of themselves as the expert, even though they know they actually. Here, you are, but the way that you're dealing with your prospect or your existing client, you're actually letting them run the show because you never charged them the right way. You're desperate for money and you don't want to piss them off. And
that's another good point too, is a lot of times that's just what they're used to. So, so many people are still, doing or purchasing break fix IT services. So that's what their idea of IT is. So even talking to them about proactive and managed IT services is different than what they're used to. So going from something like that to cybersecurity, I like to use the analogy. It's kind of like, people are trying to buy their IT services like they're shopping for groceries. But we're in a point now where they need to look at it more like, the conversations they have with their doctor or their lawyer. That's who we are in this scenario at this point, because there's just so much danger and risk out there that they need to be aware of.
Yep.
So if they don't know their risk, how can they make an informed decision on IT services? So this is one of the things that I talk to prospects about a lot. It really has to do with, this is something, it's not just for us. I mean, it is helpful for us to be able to see what kind of position you're in and be able to prescribe the level of support that you need to provide IT services to keep you properly protected. But even more than that, they need to understand what their environment looks like, what their risk is, what they're trying to protect. Again, a lot of these business owners are making these types of decisions for some reason based purely on their own experience, and which they don't really have a lot. But if you think about any other business decision that a business owner typically makes in their day in and day out, they're gathering information, they're pulling up data and analytics before they make that decision. IT, for some reason, is not one of those. And that's what we're trying to provide by doing the cybersecurity risk assessment. Again, this is something at the end of the day that just furthers that knowledge that they're dealing with an IT expert, not just somebody where they're going and saying, hey, I want this, and that.
I had a call yesterday with a gentleman named Michael, and he was like, I said, walk me through, we're testing a new sales process right now. So I'm doing, we're talking about this. I'm kind of going through and talking to some MSPs myself. And I asked him what his sales process was. And, we do a walk around network assessment. Like, okay. And then we started getting into it. And I said, well, one of the issues, we're 5-8 minutes down the road. And I said, well, one of the issues is you're not talking cybersecurity. He said, well, we're actually doing a cybersecurity assessment. I'm like, why are you not talking about that then?
Yeah.
Give some value to it. Do all the things. Don't just diminish how important that is. Make sure your prospect knows everything you should be talking about is cybersecurity first. Security.
Yep.
Those are the things they need to know. Here's the biggest factor, guys. These are differentiators. Most of the competitors that you're out there dealing with are not doing that. So you want to be the one that has these conversations that are security first. Even if you're doing a bunch of stuff that's traditional IT, fine. Talk security first. Lead with it.
You know how many slides I have in my presentation deck that are about IT support services?
1, 0, 1. Yeah.
1. So and I will get to that slide. I don't even talk about it that much. I say we do this. This is why it's here. But this is the easy stuff. We need to focus on the things that you need to be aware of and the things that are going to make or break your business. Because that's one of the other things. A lot of us we talked a little bit about mid-market, but most of us right now are dealing with small and medium-sized businesses. If they suffer an incident like this, most of them don't have the cash flow to easily recover. Like the percentages of small businesses that go out of business when they suffer a breach are ridiculous. So they've got a lot more.
Are you going to talk about the presentation coming out of this, or is that next week completely?
I don't have a whole lot on the presentation itself.
So one thing that I want to I just wanted to ask that so I didn't step on your toes. One
Yeah.
thing I want to specifically say, most businesses do not realize, a great question that we include in our discovery questions on the CSRA for our members is, how much money do you have in the bank? What's your revenue? And what would you do if X number of dollars was gone? And they're like, well, it'd be insured by the bank. A lot of people are assuming that their bank would cover it. A lot of people would assume that their insurance would cover it, but then you start getting into the nitty gritty and they don't know. They have no idea that an international wire transfer after 30 minutes is gone. And you actually are not insured by the bank or protected by the bank. They do not know that you actually need some type of a breach or compromise coverage to protect from that. And then you have to prove that you weren't negligent to get the claim paid after a forensics investigation. They don't understand that stuff. That's part of the reason you're doing this. That kind of fear, and I don't want to talk FUD, not fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but that kind of risk discussion is they're like, what? That's the stuff that has to be discussed.
And that's exactly my point. A lot of it is just they're making assumptions because they don't know any better. So to your point about insurance, they've got this assumption. So even if their insurance was going to cover it, most of them these days are only going to cover it after you've done a full forensics investigation and shown that you're not negligent. And forensics investigations aren't cheap. So on top of that, if you do that, they find you negligent. Now all of a sudden you've got the bill for the forensics on top of the money that you lost. And I think a lot of the business owners don't understand the vast difference between the cost of regular IT services and very specialized incident response type services. Like to do those forensics is not cheap.
Well, you've been through a couple of them. I know that.
Yep. Right? Very small business. Like I would say you're probably proper incident response services. You're probably looking at a minimum of $25K for like a very small, like 10 user business. And the insurance companies are catching on. So they're making sure that those types of things are there. And and one of the ones that I did, we had to do that full workup. The amount of turnaround time from that report getting to the insurance company to them approving the claim was next to nothing. So they required the report, but it was clear that they never even read it. But you got to do that due diligence. So
I had a comment from Cody here.
Yeah.
Cody, that's funny, buddy. I know Cody. So that's not far off. That's what they don't know, right?
It really is not. I've had similar type statements like that. Oh, well, we've got WebRoot or we've got something else. Cybersecurity is not one thing; it's multiple things. Which as you'll see, we'll get into that in week 4. Yep. All right. So what makes our assessments different from other assessments? And Chris, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. There's a bunch of different assessments out there. Network assessments have been a thing in MSP world for a long, long time. Really, when it comes down to it, though, what are those free network assessments getting you? It's really more of a foot in the door kind of thing at best. It's how much value do you think as a business owner a free network assessment that takes maybe a day or two tops, or in some cases even just like a quick scan, what value do you think the business owner is getting from that? And most of the results from those network assessments are not things that the business owner really cares about. They aren't the things that are going to help them make a decision on how they want to move forward, especially just contained and by themselves. The insurance company scans are kind of a newer one where we're seeing a little bit of that. Typically, these are just external scans. So they get your public IP address or addresses and run a scan to see if there's any vulnerabilities on the outside. In a lot of cases, those are really just check boxes for the insurance company so they feel safe writing the policy. But they also know on the back end, if a breach were to occur, then they come in, they do those forensics and take a look at everything. You may have answered some questions in a questionnaire at one point as well to get that policy, but they're going to go in and make sure that those things were true, that there wasn't any issues within your network environment, behind that external scan that they weren't aware of to see. And those are the types of things that are going to potentially end up in your claim getting denied for gross negligence, or with things like FTC safeguards now. If you're a business that is under that type of compliance requirement, that to me is just a much more clear black and white roadmap for denying claims.
And by the way, if anybody doesn't know what Ryan and I are talking about, in the United States, the Federal Trade Commission launched a new initiative that is a guideline, and they're basically The Federal Trade Commission deals with anyone that is a non-banking entity that does financial transactions. So I would be effectively bound by the FTC safeguards in some capacity. Your MSP would effectively be bound by that. Car dealerships, like all these other companies, the CPA firms.
It's
like
very broad. Yeah.
It's very, very broad. And the bottom line is it's giving a guideline that says, hey, you have to put these level of things in place. And you have to make sure that you're ready for this stuff. And the most important thing is hitting this on the front side and then doing a proper assessment to differentiate yourself from the competition and making sure one of the things we actively say. Cindy and I do a large webinar. Here's a replay of that. If you guys want to screenshot this really quick, you can go watch this. It's a 2-hour-long webinar that Cindy and I did the first week of March, where we talk about all this stuff and how to sell it on the front side. Cindy also did those other things that I was talking about. But it's so important that you do not skip steps in these processes and that you make it very clear. So when Ryan talks about what makes our assessments, and he's not just saying the 7-figure MSP guy, like we teach the stuff, but the MSPs in our program, this is the reason that we're getting $250, $350, $450 in your currency per seat per month, because we're going out of our way to gather all this data. Oh, it's a lot of work. Yep, it's a lot of work. Nobody said it's easy. We're gathering all this data and putting it in the front of the prospect, and we're following our process to a T. If you skip steps, you lose deals. If you skip steps, you get penny shopped. That's how this works. So if you look at your own self and you don't have a sales process at all, or if your sales process is I walk in and count computers and give them an invoice, that's not a sales process, guys. And if you tell me, oh, I close 100% of my deals, that's the worst answer you could ever give me, because no good salesperson closes 100% of their deals. Any running dummy can sell Big Macs. No offense. But
nor should you, because there's the other component of is that client even a fit?
That's the problem. Exactly right. Okay, yeah. So I'll keep talking. I'm gonna let you keep going.
Sure. So I think the important thing to differentiate is the assessments that we're talking about here are paid engagements that provide real value. Okay. This isn't just, a foot in the door kind of thing. Again, it's something that is going to provide value to that prospect. It's going to be the basis for them to make whatever decision they're going to make moving forward. I talk to people all the time, you don't have to be, a salesperson. People are, IT guys in particular are always really afraid of that word. Really, your job at this point as the IT expert is to provide them this information, and then it's their job at that point to make the decision. So we're giving them the tools that they need, which is way more than they typically have when they're making decisions like this. And on top of that, there is a lot that goes into this. So that's true, but that's why they're paid engagements. So one, they're paid because we're putting in a lot of work. So you need to be compensated for what you're doing so you can, do a thorough job and not skip steps. But two, it's something that really, it's kind of like when you pay for something, you take it more seriously, right? Think about, all the different situations like that. Same thing for your prospects. Like that free assessment that doesn't really have a whole lot of stuff that they're interested in doesn't really mean anything. And it's probably really easy for them to say yes, which is why a lot of MSPs offer the free assessment. But honestly, and you'll hear this from our members, it's not hard to ask for a paid assessment. How many times we've had people come to us and go, yeah, I just asked and whoa, they just said yes. Like I didn't even have to talk them into it. Like they're expecting this battle.
We're used to it and everything else, honestly. And your fear of price objection is what's making it that way. So
in your head.
In fact, our standard pricing for the CSR, are you going to talk about the pricing for the CSR? Or
no? I didn't have specific pricing.
Okay. Note, guys, this is this is me as the leader. I don't review my guys' slides. I'm like, okay, we're ready to go. You better get your shit together. But we recommend minimum price, your get out of bed number for your cybersecurity risk assessment is $1,500. That covers up through 10 people. And then it's $100 or more per employee above that. Your mileage may vary, common sense applies, but use your judgment and charge for it. But that's our baseline. $1,500 is your minimum, covers up to 10 employees. We just had somebody just closed a $3,000 one for a single person shop because they had a massive amount of data.
It was more complicated. Yep. And then I think, didn't we have somebody not too long ago that was doing one for like a 700 person firm that had 6 locations or something like that? There was a big one not too long ago.
There was a big one. I don't remember what that was, but yes, you're correct. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, point being is you just just asking for this stuff. Very, very rarely have I come across that where I've asked and they've made a big deal about it. And honestly, if you propose this to somebody and you explain to them what you're doing and why you're doing it, and they still balk at that cost, more than likely they're not going to be a good fit for ongoing services anyway. So it's really no loss. It really just saved you the time and effort.
I don't mean to keep cutting in because this we're having good discussions.
It's a good conversation.
This all comes down to, if you think about your mindset as an MSP owner, you're afraid to deal with price objections because you're not charging enough for what you have, and you might not get the deal. But if you do it the way that you're doing it, you're going to be back in the same exact boat. I call it the MSP wheel of death. Like, you're just literally going around on a hamster wheel, doing the same stuff over and over and over again, never getting yourself to where you can actually grow. You have to charge the right amount to get to a place. And it starts with doing a risk assessment. It starts with charging for a risk assessment the right way. Establish that early.
And just to make that point too, so I've had this happen personally. We've had many members who have had this happen. Occasionally you're going to even run into somebody who, they're like, I don't need the risk assessment. I know I need this stuff. Where do I sign? Let's just move forward, right? And so I did that a couple of years ago where I had a client that was like that. And what was interesting was, your first gut reaction is, okay, cool. That just saved me all that work. I've got the deal signed, boom. And then it was less than a month later that they're looking at their invoice. Somebody else had come along and said that they were paying X number of dollars for IT, and they freaked out because while they recognized that they needed security initially, because we never went through the assessment, because they never saw what their risk was, because they didn't have that basis for why we do the things that we do, they couldn't wrap their heads around it, especially when you have an apples and oranges comparison with what somebody else is paying for IT. So they freaked out and didn't have a clue as to why we were doing the things that we're doing. So again, that goes back to the point of not skipping steps.
Yeah. Even
if they are ready to go, you need to make sure that they understand it. And to take it even a step further, another thing that we run into is, if there's a change in leadership at a given company, a new COO, a new controller comes in, it's another opportunity to come in and sit down and go over and make sure that they understand the risk and the why we do what we do and what we're doing in order to keep them safe. Because otherwise they're just going to look at that bill and they're going to question it.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into what you're waiting for with the tax. So what are the things that we're looking for? What does the assessment entail? So we kind of break it out into 4 categories. We're looking for things related to their team. As we know, the weakest link in any security infrastructure is always the end user or humans in general. We are looking at things like their applications. So like, SaaS applications are a big one these days, but what kind of stuff do they have installed on their computers? Things like that. We're looking at their overall network and infrastructure, like their, everything from their computers to devices that are on their network to the network devices themselves. All of those things kind of come together. And then lastly, we're looking at their data because, that's one of the biggest things, that kind of differentiates. Again, it's not the end all be all because, they still, even a company that doesn't have PII, isn't a CPA and storing social security numbers all over the place, they're still going to be at risk for downtime, at risk for the money that's in their bank account. Every business out there has risk, but we're kind of looking at it in these 4 categories when we're kind of going through to discover and paint this picture of what their risk is through the process of the risk assessment. So what are the tools that we use? So I went through, I'm going to talk about them kind of high level from a category perspective. We'll hit a couple examples of some of the individual tools that we use to facilitate these types of things. As a whole in 7-Figure, we are tool agnostic. So, so long as you've got something that can gather this data or perform these functions, that's all that matters. You can take that data and then we can put it together. So it really doesn't matter.
I think one thing that I'm just going to mention really quick is we see a lot of MSPs coming to us with I have this one tool that's quick and easy and dirty.
Yep.
I think that is that's a mirage.
And I'm going to talk about that.
Okay. I'm going to let you go on that, and then I'll comment as we go.
It's funny. The ones that you don't ask me if I'm going to talk about it, the ones that you do, I don't. All right. So starting off, so I marked this one as optional. I find it very valuable to start with an RMM tool. Just it helps in deploying the other tools as you're going. So in my case, I'll use my RMM. I'll get that installed first, and we'll put that into a prospecting mode. So it's not actually set up to do their third-party patching or their updates. It's basically just in monitoring mode, and really is just a means for me to push out the other tools easily. So this is by no means something you need to use for an assessment, but it can really streamline the process and make it a lot easier to get things deployed logistically. One of the things I do like about this is I also like to, whenever possible, sit down in the environment and install at least the one thing. So an RMM in this case on each endpoint wherever possible, because when we do that, we can see the things that we can't see otherwise. So, in some cases, it's easy to, send a link or, an attachment to people and have them install it on the endpoints themselves from their standpoint. Sometimes if it's a far away location that doesn't make sense to go out to, you don't have that option. But whenever possible, it's always good to get the physical eyeballs onto things, because when you're remoted in or when you've just got a tool on there and you haven't seen the environment, you're missing out on things like Post-it notes with passwords on their monitors or under their keyboards, things like physical security. I had one that I did before. They had this really state-of-the-art security system, and then they had all of their doors propped open. When I had gotten there that day, the person I had been talking to was not there. And I just let them know that I had talked to them, and they let me touch every computer without even asking any questions. So it's not just about the technology. You got to look at the big picture with a lot of this stuff too. That does factor into what we look at when we're analyzing these results at the end. So this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue with assessments. So many of the things that people use on a day-to-day basis are going the software as a service route. From things like the larger things like Office 365 and Google Workspace to anything from QuickBooks Online to a lot of the line of business apps that are out there. So much of this stuff is now in the cloud and being accessed through a web browser. So it's really important to have a understanding of how that works. So one of the things that we do for SaaS monitoring, we use a really good tool called SaaS Alerts. That's what I like to use. I think a lot of our members use that. There's probably a few others out there, but SaaS Alerts gives you a ton of data, particularly when you're talking about Google and Microsoft environments. So one of the things that, and I'll show you on the next slide, it gives you a really nice picture of, people don't realize how under attack they are on a daily basis. Like just the login attempts alone that they don't see because they don't have any type of monitoring or alerting turned on is ridiculous in a lot of cases. So they don't think about things like, what if my username and password gets out there? So that's a big one. Where it also allows us to monitor for things like how much data is being moved. So like if somebody downloads or uploads a bunch of files that are in excess of a certain threshold, it'll give you that information, so you can see if data is currently being exfiltrated, things like that.
A really good objection that we see a lot on this type of thing. A great example of this, going into a doctor's office or going into and there's a lot of, one of my favorites was going into orthopedic clinics that are privately owned. Getting a little bit harder because all these conglomerates are gobbling these guys up, but there's definitely still a bunch of them out there. And they're like, oh, we use an EMR and the hospital takes care of that.
Yep.
And it's so easy to break through that and kill that, but you have to make sure that you educate them. Don't worry about, this is why you do the assessment, because you can prove to them with a tool like SaaS Alerts that this is actually what happens if the workstation gets compromised.
Yep.
That doesn't matter. Like, it's great, but literally you have access into the EMR and maybe your EMR stuff's there, but what if they get into your bank accounts? You have to be able to poke holes in those kind of things with these tools.
And that's kind of how we'll sum everything up, by taking those little breadcrumbs and the evidence that we find to paint those pictures so they can see those real world scenarios where they're at risk. Another big one, we've got another tool that we use called Augment. That's basically an agent that goes on the machine, and it will scan over time to see what different SaaS apps are actually being accessed in the environment. So that's one of the things that we always ask as a question. Do you know what applications or services that your people are using? It's a difficult question for people to come up with, even at the best of times, but they never have a clue or that visibility what their people are looking for. So, one of the examples I like to use is, you've got a prospect who's using the 365 environment, and then you run this SaaS application scan and find out that the bookkeeper is regularly accessing a Dropbox account. what's that mean? I mean, could be just something innocent. She's working on some, greeting card for her family, or it could be, that she's using it to exfiltrate data because she's getting ready to
Well,
go
how
out.
many of your actual CPAs are syncing stuff to Google Docs or syncing stuff to Dropbox, and you don't realize that all your content is sitting out there, Mr. Client, right? It's stuff
and it could be an innocent mistake just because they don't know better. But if you don't have that visibility,
or they approved of it, right? Or they were fine with it, but we wanted to make sure we have to look at your network like the hackers do.
Yep,
that kind of stuff, right?
So that's a really cool application just to see, and it's amazing because people may give you like a handful of services that they use, and then you run one of those scans and find out that there's hundreds that are being accessed in their environment.
Yep.
A lot of them are no big deal, but it's the ones that you gotta be aware of, that you're putting that information together so you can paint that picture that are important.
So, a question we just got on this, which I want to make sure we talk through. We got about 15 left, just so you know. We probably run a little bit late, but just so you know. Felix just asked, how does this work with remote workforces?
I think it works really well. I mean, because this one in particular, because we're talking about SaaS applications, that's the environment that those are work really well in. The stack that we build for our clients is very specifically remote workforce based. Even if the client is daily in an office 99% of the time, one thing that COVID proved for us, which luckily we were doing it ahead of time, was you need to be ready at any given point to be able to turn the switch and have people work from home tomorrow. So that's how I've built the stack that we use for our clients. But something like this is really, and that's why something like a SaaS alerts or a similar type of program is not just for an assessment. It's really important to look at on an ongoing service type basis, because you need to be aware of these things when you're the one being paid to protect them as well. And this here is a map from SaaS alerts. So this is showing over the course of a month how many login attempts from across the country were
also why it's important to not just scan in one tiny little window. Right. This takes time to monitor.
Yep. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, why our assessments run a little bit longer than the typical 2 or 3 day quickie assessments. But as you can see, this just is a nice little snapshot of how under attack most environments are going to be. With proper security in there, that's not that big of a deal. You've got different things like MFA and GeoBlocks and whatnot, but you need to be aware that those things are going on. Another big thing that we look at is phishing simulations. We all know email is one of the biggest attack vectors that's out there. We need to find out how susceptible people in that environment are to clicking on these malicious emails. So one of the things that we recommend is a minimum of 3 campaigns for an assessment, because if you just send one, it's hard to tell what's going to happen. It doesn't give you a clear enough picture. It's a too small of a sample size. It may be something where they were looking for it because they knew that the company had just signed up for this assessment. Somebody already got one, and then they told everybody to watch out for it and spilled the beans. So we recommend at least 3 campaigns. It gives you enough spread over at least a 3 or 4 week period. It gives you a much better sample size. Personally, I found the cadence of doing, because most of the platforms that are out there will give you difficulty levels on them, by starting with an easy one, kind of lull them into a false sense of security, hit them with a hard one, and then a medium one. That gives us, I found that gives us the best results. We have platforms, so we use Breach Secure Now as one of the platforms that is included in our membership. There's a bunch of different ones out there that will do this type of thing. It's just really important that you do it. This is another one where, when people skip steps, this is a kind of a common one, because either the prospect doesn't want to give you the credentials to get in there and whitelist emails within their email environment, or they're working with another IT company and they don't want to tip their hat that they're looking elsewhere. It's just really important. This is such a big piece of what their risk profile looks like, so making sure that you have that. Another thing that I like that Breach Secure Now has is a quiz that basically determines through a series of questions how susceptible people are to not just phishing emails, but other human-related types of security issues. So that gives you a nice baseline too. I mean, you may be working with a much smaller client, or not as mature of a business that is operating completely on Gmail, where phishing gets a little bit difficult. So something like that quiz kind of helps pick up the slack with something like that. Dark web scanning is another one. This is probably a basic one. It's probably one that's included in a lot of those quickie or network scans that you see out there. This is an important one to have because it's a piece of the puzzle when you're looking at the overall results. But it's not the smoking gun that a lot of people think that it is. In fact, one of the common questions we get is, oh no, I did the assessment and I didn't have any dark web results. That's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean anything bad. But I will say there's almost always a reason for that. So either there's no dark web results because they are using Gmail, or they have domain email, but they're using their personal email to do business. It's a brand new business, so it hasn't been around that long. They just recently switched their domain. I've seen all of those reasons in not having a whole lot of dark web results. But again, just remember, this is a piece of the puzzle, and you're going to be looking at the sum total of the data to paint your picture. This is one that I think is so important, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about, or maybe don't interpret with the intensity that maybe they should. So when you go into an environment, most environments are either not doing anything at all, or they're relying simply on automated patching, whether they're actually monitoring that automated patching or they just got it turned on and they're hoping and praying. So what a vulnerability and network scanning tool is going to do, some examples of these would be, like Nodeware, CyberCNS. They're going to go out, they're going to scan your network. They're going to, there's typically agents that are running on the endpoints, and then a sensor agent that's scanning the larger overall network. They're looking for, what devices are on the network, what IP addresses that they have, what vulnerabilities that are exposed still. So whether that's through, an unpatched vulnerability that, their automated patching just isn't working. But one of the other things, and why this is so important to consider, is if there's something that has a vulnerability that a patch doesn't exist for, you need to be aware of that. And so, even from an ongoing support standpoint, why a tool like this is important to have in your ongoing stack, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in week 4, is you need to be aware of it. You need to be looking at these things from a vulnerability standpoint. If you're only looking at it from a patch management standpoint, you're missing those things that don't have a patch available for them. You're going to run across that in your environments, and you need to know and strategize how you want to keep the rest of the network safe in those environments. Is it something that can just be turned off for now? Is it not needed? Or do we need to isolate it because it's a mission critical resource? Like, what do we need to do to address that? And you're just not going to know that without scanning specifically for vulnerabilities if you're just depending on your patch management. Another thing too, cameras, Internet of Things devices, networking equipment, other stuff like that. That's stuff that a lot of people don't think about. You typically go into an environment when we're doing these assessments and see they've got everything all on one network. It's not segregated. So, how many cameras have we seen? There's some that have been just completely banned in the United States because of vulnerabilities and susceptibility to hacking. If those are sitting on the same network as your corporate devices,
think about how many IoT devices are out there. Phones, staff phones, thermostats, refrigerators, coffee machines, like all this stuff now.
And there's absolutely nothing you can do about those in most cases. So what you need to do is make sure that you're aware of them and make sure that they're on a segregated, VLAN, a segmented from your corporate network. So that way you don't have to worry about them, but you need to know when they're there. You also need to know, ongoing, if somebody does something stupid and plugs something into a network that they're not supposed to. So, there's ways to manage all of this stuff, but it all starts with identifying it and knowing that it's there. Personal identifiable information scanners. This is another big one. It's funny. Almost every time I talk to a prospect, we don't store any personal information. We're good. And it's like one of my favorite things to do is to come in and go, by the way, I know exactly who your bookkeeper is or who does your payroll, because you can always tell based on the amount of PII that's found on certain machines. So it's really important to look at this stuff, at its very base. It's typically an agent that's going to scan the endpoints and the servers and things like that. Actifile is probably the biggest one that we use with a lot of our members. But there's a bunch of different tools out there that'll do this type of stuff, but definitely something you need to scan. Kind of the more recent wrinkle that we're seeing is more and more people are in the cloud, even prior to reaching out to you for prospective IT and security services. Not a lot of them do it very well yet, just because it's kind of a more complicated scenario, but it is important. I mean, there are ways around it, some of them more manual. I know Actifile is got a system in beta right now to scan that type of stuff, that it is active. So they've got the ability to, jump through a couple of hoops, but they've got the ability to scan, OneDrive and SharePoint data. So that's, a really important thing. You need.
And I know some of our members actually take that and sync it down local and then scan it and then,
Yep. So that's another workaround to do it. It really depends. I mean, some environments have terabytes and terabytes of data within their SharePoint, so it can become difficult. But point being, there are things that are going to be difficult, and going back to the not skipping steps, we just need to find ways of doing it. That might be an example where, you take that baseline pricing that you mentioned earlier, and that's going to be a more complicated environment where you have, you charge them a little bit more for what you're going to have to do in order to do that. I do think, though, that a lot of the companies that have PII scanning tools are starting to come around and realizing that they're going to need to find a solution for that, because that's really where everybody's going in the first place. It used to be they weren't there, and then we brought them there when they hired us for services. Now we're starting to see more and more where people are already in the cloud, not typically managed. So there's a lot of work to be done, but their data is already there, and we need to take that into account.
Yep.
But in a sense, you want to make sure you're scanning all the endpoints, scanning all the servers, scanning things like the cloud and NAS devices as well. You need to get a really good idea of where that personal identifiable information is, because sometimes it doesn't even need to exist anymore. Sometimes it's old and it's just sitting out there and causing risk for no reason. Password scanners, this is kind of a newer one to the toolbox, but this has been really, really effective for some people. So scanning things like your browser. So how many people on a daily basis these days are just, they get the little prompt from Chrome or Edge that says, do you want to save this password in the browser? And they hit yes. We've also seen a whole lot of high-profile breaches where this has basically been used, where they have more of a simple phishing attack that, because of all of that access that they have in their browser, they've got the keys to the kingdom basically there, where it's turned into a much larger hack. The one I'm thinking of off the top of my head, I think it was Cisco. There was an engineer who had all of his company passwords that he used to access equipment and VPNs.
Most of them have come from bad password hygiene.
Yeah. So it was his personal account that got hacked. They had no idea. They weren't targeting Cisco. And then they got the keys to the castle, and it turned into a much larger thing. So scanning for things like passwords, so you can have that educational discussion about it, but not just browsers. We often see, password.doc and password.xls files where people just, they don't even really try to hide it, because they're not thinking that somebody's going to be in their system without their knowledge, looking through things. The fact is that the stuff that we're doing in this assessment is almost identical to what happens if you get a virus in your computer that you're not aware of. Most viruses don't actually deploy for an average of 3 to 6 months at this point, because they're doing an assessment just like we are to figure out, whose computers they're in, because they usually don't know. They're not specifically targeting you, to see what type of ransom or what type of monetized opportunities they have to get money out of this type of thing. So it's really
we do get a quick question, Ryan, here. Can't really see who this is because they didn't authenticate, but I just want to clarify this. Mm-hmm. We're talking about doing an assessment here, not necessarily what the client should use.
We're going to get into this in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this in a few weeks, but I want to make sure that there's some clarification on this. First of all, we're talking about looking at the machines and figuring out because even what we've also definitely seen at most clients, and I'm going to say 95% MSP prospects, they may be using a LastPass or Keeper or something else that's out there, but then they still have all these plain text passwords in the browsers because they're doing personal stuff. I'm going to give you a great example of this. I was at my physical, I hurt my Achilles, so I was getting some physical therapy on it, was talking to the owner, going through all this other stuff. I was just, kind of testing our stuff on the owner. And she's like, well, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity because we have an EMR. I'm like, okay, what do you do on all the workstations? And then we looked at the workstations. Yeah. All their staff is doing all their personal stuff on all the stations, not in the EMR, because the EMR is cloud-based and it was in a browser, but all the staff's there's 45 people. They got all these employees working and saving all their passwords in the browsers so they could actually be accessed. She was like, I'm like, this is a minefield.
And they're probably going to have the EMR access credentials in there as well. So somebody gets into one of those computers, Now they have those credentials.
Yep.
So all of that data that was safe in your EMR is now exposed, and the company that you're using for that isn't going to do shit for you because it was they logged in with your credentials. It's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. So yeah, that's critical to understand.
Yep. So I just wanted to bring that up. Ryan is going to cover the actual tools in your stack in a few weeks. So we'll talk about that at the time.
I like Keeper though. So now that we've run all of these tools, what does the evidence tell us? So the way that I like to look at this is it's like predicting a crime scene. So we're not looking at an active crime scene and trying to figure out what crime actually happened at this stage. We're trying to look at the evidence and see what the most likely crime is going to be. Like, how are they most likely to get hacked? So I look at the tools as kind of like the CSI stage of things. So we're gathering the evidence, and then once we have all of that, we are then the detective, and we're taking a look at this evidence to try and piece together, in this case, what the crime might look like. So something like, are they highly susceptible to phishing attacks, and they have a bunch of data exposed on the dark web, and they don't have any MFA enforcement? I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, they could get hacked tomorrow, and it wouldn't surprise you at that point because dark web data, they've got the map out there, and then they don't have MFA, so somebody is just waiting to grab that information. Do the users have users accessing cloud storage services other than the ones that the business would be using? Do you have a situation where, like I was talking about earlier, that bookkeeper is getting ready to leave and start their own business and pulling all of your client data? These are all things that you need to do. So it's about taking a look at all of those pieces and telling a story based on the evidence that you found. Most prospects are going to be a little bit different, but that's why it's important to gather all of those pieces and those stages of evidence to take a look and kind of paint that picture when you're having that conversation with them. The goal here is not to just scare them again; it's to educate them. So we're trying to put their heads in a place where they can easily visualize how this type of thing can happen, because most of the time they had no clue any of this stuff was an issue or in some cases even existed.
And we want your goal for this. Ryan had a great slide here about predicting the crime scene. Mm-hmm. That's important, but it's also really critical that when somebody comes in and gives them a cheaper option, this is why this stuff's so critical. You have to go through all these steps, because when they're dealing with, so-and-so walked in and told me they could do this for $9 a seat or $39 a seat or whatever, they can say, holy cow, they're not doing any of this. They have to be able to deduce that on themselves and almost eliminate the variable and talk to them, be like, what are you doing for cybersecurity? You want to educate them that much.
On top of that, those scenarios, they're actually putting them more at risk. So I would say, I could go in and do a risk assessment next month after you use that IT company that you got for $9 a seat, and show that there's even more risk in your environment now, because they're putting tools like their RMM that have God mode access on all your computers. So what if that gets hacked because they don't have layers in place to protect against their own stuff? So it's all really important. But again, we're painting that picture. We're educating the prospect because they don't know any of this stuff, like not even at a high level. So this is all news to them. And is it scary? Yes, but I wouldn't call it FUD because it's stuff that they didn't know, but they definitely need to if they're trying to run a business in today's world. And unless they're completely off the grid, which I don't know how you could survive a business like that. I mean, you might be able to do your own stuff, but you're not going to be able to work with any of your vendors doing it that way. So one of the other questions that comes up a lot is about the time that it takes to do an assessment. So, again, people have this traditional mindset of doing these quickie foot in the door kind of assessments. So how long does our assessment take? Proper cybersecurity risk assessments by what we're teaching take about 30 days minimum. There's sometimes some wiggle room in this. They're not able to always give you the information that you need in order to do some of the steps up front. But there's a few different reasons why it takes that long. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we run, things like PII scanners, vulnerability scanners, those are things that only take a couple of days. But there are certain things that we require a little bit more time to get in order to give them that thorough assessment and provide that value that's worth the fee that we're asking them to pay. So when we look at this, SaaS data is a good one. If we're only grabbing like 3 days of attempted logins on their SaaS data, that's not really going to tell us that much. So, getting in 3 to 4 weeks of that SaaS data paints a much bigger picture of all of these different login attempts that they're seeing, and then combining that with stuff like the data that's on the dark web that's exposed, the passwords that are in their browsers, to show them how susceptible they might be and how tomorrow somebody could get into their Microsoft 365 environment. Phishing campaigns was another big example. Again, we recommend at least 3 campaigns over the course of an assessment to get you that really good picture of how this all looks and what their susceptibility for those emails looks like. So you need 3 to 4 weeks to do that, to run those 3 campaigns and get that data in there. But again, part of the reason we're doing this is to show them this value. Doing them that quickly, not charging for them, it's real easy for the prospect to dismiss that as sales and marketing material that you're just trying to sell them something. This is giving them value. Even if they decide to go another route after you've given them this information, very rarely, if ever, are you going to have somebody come back and go, "I wasted my money on this." Minimally, they may decide that they don't have the budget to move forward, or they don't, they're not ready for this, whatever their excuse might be. But they've now got a roadmap of some of, I like to describe it as a sinking ship. They've got the big holes that they can prioritize and know what they need to do on, but they can make that business decision at that point. Whereas before something like this, they had absolutely no information to be able to do that reliably.
And I want to comment on, we got a comment online, and I just want to bring this up and comment on this, because this is without question the biggest protection that 7-figure MSP gets in our scenario. Ryan, that we see this. Yes, it's been that way historically. I'm not going to debate any of this, okay? But we have clients that, when we have hundreds of MSPs in our program around the world that are doing this process, this works. They are presenting this the right way to their prospects. They are getting the budget. The clients are realizing, especially as the White House Cybersecurity Initiative just launches, the FTC safeguards just launched. I forget what the Canadian one is called. There's also a UK one coming. All of these regulations are coming down. And then we have the insurance companies accelerating all of it. Yep. So we are being put in a place where if you don't do this stuff, someone's going to. There's budget being allocated for this. It's just new to them. They have never done it. They don't have budget because they've never done it this way before.
Yep.
You have to rewire them.
Nor do they know. They don't have the budget for it because they don't realize how serious it is.
They don't know. So I understand what you're saying, Alex, and I know it's really easy to just dismiss it like that. But this is working. We have guys doing this in every English-speaking country in the world.
In extremely rural Canada.
Very rural Canada, very rural Australia, very rural America. We even have these happening in Mexico and South America. So it's happening. They will allocate budget if they realize that they are going, it's more important that they realize it's happening and they can make the choice. And then you are actually putting a line in the sand. Another thing that we include in our program is we have a risk acceptance notification. I'll continue to service you, but I'm letting you know, I educated you, you're going to get hacked. Here's my statement saying, here's how we're going to incident respond to it. We're going to respond to it this way. And it's going to be on you. And you can deal with the negligence when it happens. Yep. And it's real. And we're seeing these things happen because if you're in a place now where we're not far from you having to have this conversation by law and then dealing with the consequences if you don't. That's coming to this industry, guys.
I think the writing's on the wall already. I mean, just with the White House statement.
The White House statement literally says that. Literally says, if you don't talk to your clients about this, we're going to hold you responsible. Yep. So be aware of that.
And I would also argue, too, that the companies at this point that are saying that they don't have the budget for this type of thing, I guarantee you they don't have the budget if they get breached. They're going to go out of business if that's the case. Right. So again, the importance and the purpose of the assessment is if that's where they're at, where they don't think that they have the budget for it, like legitimately don't think that they have the budget for it. Now that they know what they're dealing with, what the risk is, and they better start working on getting their budget situated because this is now the cost of doing business.
Yeah. And companies are doing this stuff all the time. Keep in mind, guys, they've been putting general liability insurance in, E&O insurance in. They've been doing, what's the ROI on that? Zero, usually, most of the time. They'll go years, decades without a single claim, but they still do it because of the risk. This is going to get added to that. Yeah. We just have to start putting it in place. And the government, is always slow to do it, but you know what's accelerating it is the insurance companies are pushing them and saying, look, we're not going to, and you think about it now, the insurance companies are saying, okay, fine, submit a claim. It's going to be denied and you have to prove that it's valid.
Mhm.
And the typical, one other thing I want to say, the typical MSP response or IT guy response to, oh, they got a virus, they got a ransom, they got a breach, they got a compromise, it's wipe and reload. That's not going to fly anymore, guys.
Nor, and you still don't know how they got in. So that may not ultimately fix the problem.
Well, and somebody said yesterday on a call we did, in fact, I was doing this call with Darren from Total yesterday, and they were talking about how the breach was actually loaded in the BIOS. It hit the BIOS on the network. So it just got reinfected as soon as they wiped and reload. But effectively, think about the analogy of you're walking into a stabbing and you're going to wipe down the room and bleach everything, right? That's effectively what you're doing.
Right.
So those things are not happening anymore. And you have to stop allowing it, enabling it, and start standing your ground. At the very least, Alex, I appreciate your comments here because I'm not ripping on you or talking smack. But he had a comment here. I know exactly where you're coming from, but they're at the point where they come back and they say, okay, I'll take my chance. That's fine. Let them do that.
Yep.
But you have to draw the line in the sand and say, not on my watch.
And we've seen a lot of examples of that too. So by taking this approach, when they do that, that's fine. You've established yourself as the expert at that point.
Correct.
We've seen a ton of people who have come back, 6, 8, 2, a year down the road, and because they established themselves as the expert, when that company that said that they would take their chances, they do get breached. Who are they coming back to? And then they're signing up for service.
You were the only one that told us about them. We've seen in our program, we've seen countless. We're talking 100 plus at this point, breach scenarios where they were blaming, they tried to blame the MSP and the insurance company tried to blame the MSP and they stood up and said, nope, I had the letter. I ran the play. Boom. Okay, Ryan, let's keep going. I know
we're almost here. So that sounds like a lot of work. Are you sure we can't just do the quickie scan? I think we probably beat this one to death with all the other slides. But at the end of the day, you want to come in, you want to provide a service that's valuable and get paid for your efforts. So there's a lot more value on both sides of the equation to doing a thorough assessment that's going to have value for them and getting paid for it as well. So it's not a waste of time on your end. Then what about this service that allows me to send a link to the user? So this is another objection that we've seen. I'm not going to name names. I think that there's some tools out there that are like this that are great as an augment or an add-on to the process that we're doing. So some of these tools kind of equate to like a mini pen test, and I think they're great. I think that they can definitely help. They add an extra level of flavor and detail to the assessment that you're doing, but by themselves, they're not that much different than those quickie scans. So they might be
I think you just got to be really careful that it's not all you're doing.
Right.
Because our job here is to not only do the work, do the assessment, but to show them and to prove to them. Great stuff. There's multiple tools out there that are just send a link. I think there's 4 or 5 now that I know of that are just send a link. Just be very careful with that because it's kind of a mirage of easy and quick. And it's just not thorough enough to get the money that we're talking.
And keep in mind, it's not just about the data, it's about the process as well. So doing a thorough assessment like this is your audition for them. You're showing them your white glove level of service. These are the types of things, not only by showing them the risk and educating them so they know what's out there, but showing them what you have to offer. These are the types of things that are going to get you that 300 plus a seat and without a whole lot of questions asked. Going through this process, the number of people who kind of had that skepticism, and then they go through this a couple of times and realize, very rarely at that point, if you've done all of the steps, do you really get all of those objections? Most of them are in our own head. If you present this stuff the way that we talk about and show them the things and the value and teach them stuff that they don't know. Yeah.
Yep.
And then for our members, so yes, it is a lot of work, but we have a new service that was recently launched for our members where we've got cybersecurity risk assessments as a service. So you're still that point of contact. You have to be that point of contact for the end user or for the business owner. You're going to be having those conversations, but this takes some of the legwork out of your hands. They're going to run those tools and gather all of this the CSI type data. In my analogy, you're still going to be the detective at the end of the day that puts everything together, but all the legwork is all done for you. So this is a little perk that we've added for our members recently as well. So what's up next? So we talked a little bit about we talked about a lot of stuff today. We're a little bit over from what we were planning on, but next week we're going to talk about the philosophy behind your stack. Again, this program is really good about helping you build your MRR, double, triple your MRR. But if you're not doing things the right way, if you're scattered, if every client that you're serving has a different stack, it's going to, just multiply the problems that you have. So, some different ways to think about how you do your stack, regardless of the tools, to make sure that your business is set up to scale quickly and easily as you're growing that MRR. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the ongoing tools. We're going to talk about the support related tools in your stack in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks for our fourth week of these sessions, we're going to get into the security stack tools. So I think that's probably the one that everybody's on the edge of their seats for. So that should be fun. And then Chris mentioned it already earlier. We do have our live event coming up May 16th through 18th. If and this was the one that I circled at the beginning of the year. I think Nashville is going to be a lot of fun, really good location and venue for this kind of thing. But if you've got the time, I highly encourage you to think about joining us. Just if not to, the speakers and everything are great, but get an idea of like how this community interacts and works together. I remember, I think, what was it, Dallas last year? We had somebody actually had a breach incident happen while we were in the show, and we had an entire table in the back in between events that were
working through the incident. Yep, exactly.
So really cool.
All right, great job, Ryan. A couple quick things. I want to answer a couple quick questions here. We had a question from one of our members, Sheila. This is a little bit deeper, so I'm not going to necessarily go into this right now, Sheila, for you, but what I would advise, Ryan, is there open office hours today for sales?
Today, yep, we got open office hours tonight at 8:30 Eastern.
Okay, so there's a couple things that you can do. So Sheila, first of all, I would take this directly to open office hours. Our members have that included, so I would take that, and I think Ryan,
I'm running it tonight.
You're running tonight, so Ryan can talk with you about that. There's a lot of things that we talk about that. We also have a bunch of videos that Cindy and I have done in the sales documents and templates area of the dashboard. Those two things. So I know that's a little bit tight on time, Sheila, but that needs to get worked through. It's tough. Second thing, Sheila had asked also, is this going to be recorded and shared in the 7-Figure Dashboard? Yep. It's also in the IT and MSP business owners Facebook group in the guide section. All of these are in the, so if you guys look in the group, either on mobile or on desktop, you can see that there's a guide section and it's there, and you can actually view all of the recordings and they get put there pretty quickly. So those are there for you. One last thing I want to say, if you guys are interested in our 7-Figure MSP program, here's a little bit more things that you can look at. It's 7figuremsp.link, not a .com, but a link/VIP invite. There's a couple things you can do. You can click on the links in that doc, and you can book a call with Nora from our team. You can also just find me on Facebook on any of these, or LinkedIn, or any of these other things.
I think you find them on Facebook is how it ends up working.
Usually, yeah, but not the DM side, not the DM side. So you guys can DM me, and we'll go through that. So one last question I want to hit, because this is a very relevant one. Is it common for the MSPs that adopt this to have a CISSP or something like it on staff? Here's kind of and we'll talk about this a little bit.
It's a great question.
It's a great question. Here's where I think you should go. Almost no MSP as we sit, and Ron, I'm gonna get your feedback on this if you think I'm off base at all. Mm-hmm. Almost no MSP as we sit is equipped to be a cybersecurity firm. It takes a lot to do it. I had a webinar with Darren Swan from Total yesterday. We also partner with Highwire Networks and Cyberhawk and Citricom and a couple of these other companies that are fully managed security operations centers. They have the team, you partner with them. That's the path that I would go. So the MSP is the IT guy still, but you're mandating the security operations center and the full stack across your clients through a vetted, viable partner. That's what you should be doing, because the undertaking that it is to put a full-blown security team on staff, Darren said it yesterday, over $1 million a year to do it right. Ryan, what's your take on that?
I agree. I think at this point, when you look at something like that, we are almost like a general contractor kind of scenario. So working with trusted partners to take some of that specialized work off of our plate. So, you want to have, and we're going to talk about this a little bit next week and a little bit in week 4, you want to have, a SOC in your stack, but, to fire up your own SOC is going to cost you a ton of money. Just to have your own CISSP on staff, wage-wise is going to, now we're talking way more than $300 a seat.
That is a mindset shift for the MSP. You're like, oh my God, so I'm not the guy anymore. You're the guy. You're the sales guy now. You're the man, the woman. You are the person that they need to talk to, and you're putting the work on them instead of crawling under desks. This is what I was talking about early on, and this is why it's so important to adopt a sales process and a sales mindset, because it's not about the tech anymore. It's about partners and brokering and being, like Ryan just said, a general contractor.
And to take that one step further real quick too, something like incident response is another really good example of that. There's a lot of really, really solid, knowledgeable IT people running these MSPs. Most of us are not qualified to do incident response, to do proper incident response. So that's another example of having an incident response firm that you trust, that's vetted for when those opportunities or those situations.
The mindset of most MSPs is wipe and reload. That's what I said. And some guys they look at it as, oh, I'm going to do incident response by wiping them. That's not incident response. Nope. That's not forensics. That's a totally different animal. You have to do it. And there was a comment earlier that said, hey, you guys are really, I did a 300 PC network for 35K or something. Not saying you did anything wrong. I have no idea. But the bottom line is you better be dealing with the insurance company and compliance pieces running that show, telling you what to do, or you potentially become liable or negligent.
And that part is part of incident response. It's just part of the back end. So like when you're working with an incident response firm, you're going to be the one that's still going in and reloading those machines. So there's still opportunity there for you, but only after they've given you the go ahead, because they've cleared the forensics and gotten the information that they need.
Okay. We got to run. Appreciate you guys so much today. Ryan's got to call in literally 10 minutes. So get out of here. But appreciate you guys so much for spending time with us. Hopefully this is valuable. I know I get a lot of heat for using the everyone tag. Guys, we're going to tag you anyway. It's our Facebook. It's our main Facebook group. We're going to tag you anyway. It just makes it a lot easier. But look at how valuable this content is. And hey, if it's not relevant to you, it's okay. You don't have to watch. It's fine. You don't have to comment either. I want to make sure that we're giving very good content and giving you guys something. And if you need help selling, look at the link on the bottom and shoot me a DM or whatever, and we'll take care of you. Okay, sounds good. Ryan O'Hara, great job today. You killed it. We'll see you guys next week. Ryan, what's next week again?
Next week, we're talking about standardizing your stack to streamline your operations.
Okay, so we'll see you guys next week. Have a great day. And Ryan, great job. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See you.